Welcome back to Terrible Fishing, and welcome back. It's been a whole week. It's been cold, and yesterday, hopefully, you spent a nice day with family. The beautiful thing about it is that this weekend is free fishing weekend. Oh, it's so exciting. Now, the exciting part, and we're going to talk about this, was we're going to talk about ice fishing. Now, the dangers of new ice, but we're also going to talk about the fun of when the ice is established and what's happening now here in Klamath Falls. Now, you may not know this, but Lake of the Woods is in Klamath Falls. Shares the same zip code as me. So, yeah, it's about 30 minutes away, but it's technically in here, Klamath Falls. And if you go to their webcam, which is lakeofthewoodsresort.com, scroll down to the bottom, you will see a beautiful white wonderland and ice. Yes, ice. Now, this is exciting to fishermen because ice fishing is the most fun fishing there is, practically. I mean, it really is. And last year we had no ice. Okay, it got windy. It would just break up the ice and stir it up, and it really was a very frustrating thing. But the beautiful thing about what's happening at Lake of the Woods is that we're getting what's called a cap, and hopefully it will continue. And a cap is where you get an inch or two of ice over the entire lake. So it protects the water from wind. Now, I've been looking at the weather forecast, and it's in the teens at Lake of the Woods as its lows. You know, it's getting into the teens, and with calm winds. And I'll tell you something that was exciting 2 years ago. I was working up there at Lake of the Woods, and we had the perfect week, sub-zero, no winds, and the water froze crystal clear, like you were standing on a sheet of glass. I know, none of us had ever seen such a clear freeze on the lake before. And we walked out there. Now, mind you, we're going to talk about safety. But it was about 5 inches thick, and it was crystal clear. And you could walk out there and look down and see the bottom of the lake and see fish down there, just below you. It's like walking on an aquarium. It was kind of freaky, okay? I know I would tell people to come on out, and they go, no, 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 no. I go, look, I'm a pretty big guy. You know, if it can support 300 pounds, you little people, you got it made. And so people would shuffle their feet out there with their knees bent, and they're ready. And it's like they were ready to fall through the ice any second. And then when they'd go out there about 10 feet, and then they looked down, and they were amazed. I mean, ice skaters were out there. It was just, you know, and we're going to talk about safety on this, because the thing is about new ice is the most unsafe. For one thing, you've got to be very, 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 very careful. You don't know how it froze. You don't know if it's in layers. You don't know if it's clear ice. If it's not, it's just, and it hides under the snow. So you really don't know. So we're going to talk about ice safety on this, and it will probably scare you a little bit. Ask anybody who's had a leg fall through the ice, including myself. It happens, all right? So, on new ice. Now, Lake of the Woods is very good at testing their ice and going out there and doing it, but you still cannot be reliant, because, you know, they do spot checks. So there are thinner areas. and thicker areas. Okay, it's just the way it is, and it's not going to freeze perfectly even all the way across the lake. It's just not. So there is. I use a long piece of rebar, about a 6 foot piece of rebar, and it's heavy though. But I use a big piece of rebar because it's heavy, and I can really pound the ice in front of me. Now, dressing for ice. You have to dress not only warm, but in case you fall through the ice, you have to prepare yourself for that moment to where you may fall through the ice. Now, there's lots of different ways that you could do this. Now, my snowsuit is a PFD. It floats. So, if indeed the worst happens and I fall through the ice, there's no way I will sink. It's just not going to happen. My pants, my jacket, everything floats. And I have spikes that are in my jacket, as well as a whistle and a flashlight. So, real important to have safety equipment with you. If you don't, I almost died 2 years ago of hypothermia in the water, and I was minutes away from death when they pulled me out. I will tell you that as soon as you hit cold water, you can't breathe. It literally vacuums all the air out of your lungs. Now, I have bad lungs. They've been destroyed by pulmonary embolisms, COVID, stuff like that. Never smoked, but it's just the way my lungs are nowadays. And as soon as you hit the water, you're going to find out that you cannot breathe. It's going to suck the air completely out of you, and that may cause you to panic. Do not panic. I had to keep my wits when I went into the water. And even though I couldn't breathe, I knew I was in deep, deep trouble. Now, I didn't fall through the ice that day. I flipped my kayak right after the thaw, and it was 39-degree water. So, but people saw me, and I couldn't panic. You got to sort of keep your head. And if you do fall through the ice, you're going to do several things. One, you need to get yourself out of that hole. So if you have a big piece of rebar, which I do, I literally can hold it up and use it as a chin-up. So this is usually much longer, wider than the hole that I fell in. And I can put it over the hole, and I can pull myself up, and it distributes the weight. It actually works really, really well. Now, I also have spikes, and spikes allow me to punch into the ice and pull myself out of this hole. Now, leaving myself flat on the ice. Now, you're going to be wet, you're going to be heavy, but you're going to pull yourself up with your arms and just distribute your weight across and try to scoot yourself back. You're going to find yourself freezing, and it's going to be just miserable. And this is where your whistle comes in. And pull your whistle out of your pocket, which I always have it on, in a specific pocket, so I know where it's at. And use that whistle. Somebody will hear you, all right? And they'll come out, cautiously and get you. This is real important. Now, I fish by myself a lot. Preferably, you don't want to fish by yourself. Have a friend with you. But, and then have a rope so he or she can pull you out of that hole that you fall through. I know it sounds scary. I know it does. It does sound scary, but it's new ice, okay? It's untested. Now, how do you test new ice besides your fat body? So, I told you this piece of rebar, right? I'm pounding the ice in front of me with this rebar, just punching it, and to see if it will break through the ice. And every 30 feet or so, I will cut a hole with my auger into the ice, and then I will measure it. Now, there are guy measurements, and then there's girls measurements. All right. Typically, my scoop, I have a mark on it that shows 4 inches. All right. Guy measurements may see that at 7 or 8 inches. It's just what guys do. But I'll put my scoop down there in the hole, and that piece of tape on my scoop, it allows me to see how thick the ice is. And if it's thicker than 4 inches, I will continue forward. And I'm pounding that rebar into the ice, and then I will stop at 20 or 30 feet, depending on how it feels. Now, mind you, I will also tell you that ice will make noise, all right? It's normal. You can be on top of 40 inches of ice, and you will hear that that thundering crack underneath you. Don't worry about that, all right? That happens as the lake gets thicker, all right? It will go ahead and expand, and then it will go ahead and create these noises. You can tell the difference, underneath you, what's happening, if it's actually going to give way or not. So continue to punch that piece of rebar into your path ahead of you, and continue to drill holes and measure it. Now, the beautiful thing is that you're leaving a trail behind you. So this is a tested trail. So when you come off of the lake, you want to follow your trail back, because, again, that's an area that you've tested, measured, and assured yourself that this was a good pathway. Now, you will get to a point, probably, with new ice, where it's going to be 4 inches or less. 4 inches is safe, okay? 4 inches of clear ice. Okay, this is like a ice cube. So if it's clear and solid for 4 inches, you're in a safe zone. If it's layered like a wafer, you're not in a safe zone. If it's brittle in those 4 inches, you're in an unsafe zone. You want to back out, and you want to make sure that you want a good 4 to 5 inches of nice, clear ice. I hope that makes sense to you. It's like an ice cube. It's solid, clear, and you want that. Now, the great thing is, this time of year, it's not going to be safe, all right? So don't think, Mike, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this. Okay, now, Lake of the Woods is our local, and as well as Gerber. But Lake of the Woods has a staff that will test it and measure it. Gerber does not. So Gerber is a really good lake for ice fishing, as well as Lake of the Woods. You want to call ahead and see what's going on. And they'll go out there at the end of their little, dock, and they'll punch it, and they'll do stuff, and they'll test it from the dock out. This time of year, we don't have safe ice this time of year. We don't usually have safe ice until another month. All right, at the earliest. Typically, we have the kite festival, the ice fishing festival, everything in February, because that's the safest month for ice. You can put 1,000 people and cars, although they don't want you to put cars out there, but a lot of snowmobiles, stuff like that, 4x4s, out on the ice and not worry about it. So we're going to talk more about ice fishing, okay, in our next segment. So please stay tuned, and we will be right back after these messages. All right, welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. Nice cold evening here. So we're going to talk about, now that I've scared you off the ice, okay, on new ice. Again, even when it's not new, I'm very careful about going out, even in February. You can never be too safe. Always have, I have a Garmin watch that has a panic button on it. All right, so it notifies people immediately with my GPS coordinates if indeed I fall through or have issues. That's a really nice thing for a guy like me, because I kind of fall down. I mean, I just did it this week. I fell down, hit my head, still hurts. So, it happens to where I black out and then things like that happen. So make sure that you take every precaution available to you in order to, and tell people you're going out there. All right. If you're fishing by yourself like I do, it's important to notify people that where you're going. And I just find that kind of like a ghost person. When I flipped my kayak that day, they watched me flip. And even though 40 minutes in freezing water, I should have died. But a few more minutes longer, I would have. But it was important that people knew, and they were running around on the shore yelling. Now, the team at Lake of the Woods are trained to rescue. All right, so, and you want to make sure that that you notify them. Just stop by, say, I'm going to be going out there, just FYI. What do you think about, the ice or whatever? Love my coffee. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Nothing wrong with doing that at all. So now that we've talked about testing ice and what safe is and some of the gear. Now, if you don't have a snowsuit like mine, always wear a PFD. All right, wear a PFD, a life vest, and so if you do fall through, you do not sink. That's real important. Go out there with a life vest on. Now, where do you buy all this stuff? I know it. I'm very disappointed with Klamath Falls when it comes to this. When you discover ice fishing, it's the most fun thing that you'll ever do. And nowhere in Klamath Falls truly caters to ice fishing. They just don't. I mean, not even Walmart, Bi-Mart, Sportsman's Warehouse, Parker's. I mean, nobody really caters to ice fishing. And that is probably the most disappointing thing. There's the best ice fishing supply store that you will run across is at Lake of the Woods Marina. It's the best. They cater to it. You want ice cleats to strap onto your feet. Great idea, by the way. If you want snowshoes, you can rent snowshoes from them. If you want, a sled to put all your gear in and pull it out, they rent that. If you want a shack, they rent that. you want an auger, they rent that. Or and I would tell you to do this: have them drill the hole for $5. If they have the staff, they will drill the hole. So don't rely on that service, because there's got to be a couple people there, one to stay in the store, one to go out there. So it doesn't always happen, but really nice, especially when it's thick. When it's shallow, when it's only 6 or 8 inches, you can do it. It's a piece of cake. But you can rent an auger from them. And they have the best selection of just simple ice fishing poles, rods. I like being called poles, rods. I don't know. And also tip ups. So tip up is an automatic rod. Now, that's Lake of the Woods Marina. All right, they really, it is the best ice fishing store in our town. I know, and you're thinking, what is up with all these other stores? I thought about opening a tackle store myself. I mean, I've owned stores before in companies, but I'm retired, and that's a lot of work. And I thought about it. Probably cost me about $100,000 to open my store. Believe it or not, it would. And but this town needs a good tackle store, and it doesn't have one. We have year-round fishing for fly fishing, for tackle fishing. We have river fishing. We got lake fishing. We got everything here. We got no good tackle. So if anybody out there, that wants to open a tackle store, it would cost you about $100,000 initial expense, but I think it'll be worth it. I really do. Because why give it all to Lake of the Woods Marina this time of year? So, what do you need? Well, you need a rod, right? A small one. Typically, it's about a 24 or 30-inch rod. It just looks like something, a toy is what it looks like. In fact, you get a Barbie rod or a Superman rod or Batman rod or what, they probably will work just fine, okay? But an ice fishing rod, a good one though, would run you about 30 or 40 bucks. For the rod, maybe 50, depending on your taste. But you can get a very inexpensive combo for 20 bucks, at the store. Or even less, actually. I think they have a $10 one with a inline reel at Lake of the Woods during ice fishing season. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on a fishing rod. But typically you're going to buy a very, very, very fast action rod. Actually, no, you're going to buy a slow to moderate rod, which makes it very bendy. It makes it very bendy. So it's going to bend like a noodle, all right? Because when fish bite in cold water, they barely bite. It's just a little tap, just a little tap. And you got to see it in order to set the hook. So you're going to get a slow to moderate rod with a very bright tip. Typically, we call that a strike indicator tip. I have a hard time breathing. Problem about cold weather in my lungs. You probably hear it. Cold weather in my lungs are incompatible. So, I'm going to have some warm coffee here. So, you're going to get a small little rod with a bright tip, like chartreuse, green, orange, whatever tip. And then you can add just about any reel to it. But typically, an ice fishing reel is an inline reel, which is just looks like a fly fishing reel. That's what it looks like. It really does. It looks like a fly fishing reel. Or you can get like a spinning reel that's like a 500. It's the smallest one. And because you're not casting this, all right? You're just not. It's just dropping it or lowering it down through a hole. That's what you're doing. Now, the nice thing about using a spinning reel is that you have a high gear ratio. With an inline, at best, you're going to get a 3-to-1. At best. Most of them are 1-to-1. You turn it once, it doesn't have a multiplier in it. But a spinning reel, you can get a 5-to-1. And maybe even a 6-to-1. It all depends on your taste. But that means it comes up 6 times faster than you're reeling. And that's really nice to have, by the way. Really nice. You could use other reels. Even spin casters work really well. I've got a fun little spin caster by Daiwa that I use on my second rod, and it's a spin caster, works very, very well. Now, one thing too about this is you're going to make sure that your line is very, very light. You want to use 2, maybe 4 pound test. Very light line. You don't want heavy line, because you want it to. You want to feel everything, but you don't want the fish to see it. So that's kind of your gear. Is you're a very small rod, very slow action, which means it's like a noodle. Okay, a brightly colored tip. All right, very important. This allows you to see a strike, and very light line. And you can use an inline reel, which I do on my best rod, and then or a spin caster, which I use in my backup rod, or a small spinning reel, which I also use, which is like a 500 or even a 250. It's really small. You really don't need a lot of line because you're only dropping it down 60 feet at best. Typically, I fish my ice about 16 feet depth. So you really don't need a lot of line, So that's kind of your tackle. That's your tackle. Now, there are accessories that you're going to want. And probably, besides having a chair, okay, very important to bring a chair, a folding chair. Very light folding chair. Now, I kind of get a little crazy. Mine's a recliner. I'm sitting back, kicking back. I literally can take a nap out there. It's really nice. But you want to bring a chair. So just get I'm a big guy, so I need a big heavy duty chair because I break chairs all the time. I gotten so fat. So get a chair that can support your weight. That's going to go in your sled, which, by the way, you have a big sled. Your sled's got to have everything you want in it, and you're just going to drag that behind you. So your sled, you can rent one at Lake of the Woods. That's a nice thing. So if you don't want to buy one, usually a nice sled runs about $30 or $40. They don't cost that much, and if you fish a lot, it's worth it. And you probably will get addicted to it. You probably will. So I do have, on my YouTube channel, I'll be giving away a one-man ice fishing shelter. I have, and as an extra. So, keep an eye out for Terrible at Fishing on my internet YouTube page. We'll give that away during the season. But yeah, that's you're going to have your fishing equipment and your chair, okay, and you're going to have a scoop, a ladle, some kind of scoop with holes in it. These are really cheap; they're like $10, and you're going to use this to clear out the ice from the hole. So you're going to do that. You're going to constantly clear it out, and that's just what you're going to do because it'll freeze. Your hole will freeze. I'm talking about the hole in the ice, and among others. It can get cold, but it's not like Minnesota. Those guys. Hey, they it gets very cold in Minnesota. So here, not so bad. Then you need an auger. Now you can rent an auger. I think it's $10 or something like that over at Lake of the Woods, and it's a manual auger. All right, so you're going to manually drill it with your arms. And when the lake is early and the ice is less than a foot deep, thick, it's easy to do. Now I have a motorized auger, and so that's in my sled as well. So you've got your tackle gear. You're going to have your baits. We'll talk about that in the next segment. And then your equipment. So I want you guys to stay tuned. We're going to talk about some of the other things that you'll need if you want when you go out on the ice. This is going to be fun. We'll see you back in a few minutes. All right, welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. I always say all right. I always tell you guys I got to stop that. It's my word whisker. I hate word whiskers. I have regular whiskers. I grew my side beard, and so I got my winter beard for this time of year. It keeps my chubby cheeks warm. That could be an equipment, but you girls don't do that. My sisters, they could grow a mustache well before me. I was so jealous. And nowadays, they wax the electrolysis it, bleach it, stuff like that. They still got it. But now at least people can see my facial hair and they don't see theirs. And it's Italian women. They're just hairy women. All right, let's get back to fishing. Now, we talked about some of the necessary equipment. A sled to put everything in, drag it out there. You're going to put your fishing gear in it, your baits. We'll talk about baits. Well, and your auger. You need an auger and a chair. All right? So those are the necessary things. And you're going to dress warm, okay? Now, one of the things I love is a ice shelter. These are basically pop-up tents. An ice shelter is, with no floor, okay? There's no floor in an ice shelter tent. Now, you can rent it, at Lake of the Woods. You can rent one. And if you've never done it, give it a shot. I mean, they don't cost much, like $20, $25. I don't know. I can't remember. They're not expensive to rent for the entire day. So give it a shot. You will find there are some advantages, big advantages, to having an ice shelter. And you can get ice shelters, I think you can get them on Amazon for $150, $200. So it all depends how often you want to do this, whether you want to do this, spend that. But there are, one is obviously, it shelters you from any kind of snowstorms and wind. Because when the wind comes across a frozen lake, it gets cold. So it's going to keep you warm. It just will keep you warm. And if it starts to rain or snow or whatever, you're protected. And two, the ice shelters will take any kind of sunlight and start to create a convection inside the tent. And typically, an ice shelter in our area that's not even a thermal tent. In Minnesota, they need thermal tents, which means they're insulated. Mine are not. And it gets about 75 degrees inside my tent. And, I'm not wearing my jacket inside my tent. I'm just hanging it up on the tent. And a lot of people have the heaters inside their tents. Some people, when the ice gets thick enough, you can build a fire out there. People will camp out on the lake, all right? You're going to need, a bed, a cot, or a nice recliner to keep yourself off it, off the ice and fish at night, which you're allowed to do at Lake of the Woods. So you could bring a propane heater too, if you want, and one of those Mr. Heats, and just put that in your tent. And it's nice and toasty. Don't worry. I mean, when the ice is thick, you're not going to melt it away, and it's really nice. You're really going to like that. And of course, an advantage to fishing is that it creates a dark environment. Now, when you cut a hole, the lake is a dark lake when it's got iced up, because basically it's got a roof, all right? There's no light getting into the lake. And so when you cut a hole in the ice, you're letting in a beam of light. Well, that can hinder your fishing. So in order to cap that, if you're fishing within a shelter, you're reducing the amount of light that comes through that hole. And you're still fishing in the dark down there. This is a big deal because there are some fish like brown trout, they like to eat at night. Also the kokanee, the salmon, they hit better when it's darker. It works really good. And you might catch a bass or two. You never know. Sometimes some smallies come up and hit it. So a shelter gives you warmth. It protects you from the elements, and it increases your bite in the lake. That's what a shelter does. So give it a shot at renting one. You're going to find it's very comfortable, and they're easy. They're pop-ups, basically. These things, pretty much, once you undo them, they start forming their own world all by itself. Probably take you 10 minutes to put up a tent, but it takes a little longer to stake it down. And to pop it up is easy, but then you got to put the ice stakes, screw them in. They're basically a big screw with a handle, and you're just screwing them into the ice in order to secure the shelter so it doesn't fly away on a windy day. So that's very important, by the way. And put the door away from the wind, because it has a door. That's how you get in and out. It has windows too. So if you want to open the windows to bring in some light, you could do that. So you could, during the day, light is not a problem. Now, you might want to bring a lantern, with you, if you like to, work early or late, or even camp out there. You could do that. It's kind of cool. It's really cool, actually. Night fishing is big fishing. That's where you catch big, giant fish, is at night. Fish have no idea. It's like they don't expect it. Now, what do you use for bait? This is amazing to me because during the summer, the bigger the hook, the bigger the bait, the bigger the fish. It's the way it is. I fish with 8-inch baits. I throw big, giant baits in the lake and catch big fish. Well, that goes completely out the window. It's out there. It's gone. I've used 1/80th of an ounce jigs for ice fishing, and they work great, really good. So you're going to find that the smaller the jig, the better the results. And you're not going to add any weight to it unless the weight is below it. All right? Do not add weight in between you and the hook. Don't do it. You don't need it. All right? You really don't. You're going to lower this really tiny jig. Now, what do you put on the jig? Now, you can put nothing on the jig and probably catch a ton of fish. But if you use a small, grub, look like a mealworm, or even a piece of nightcrawler, or some power bait, purple and black. There's a power bait called Tequila Sunrise. All right, it's a great ice fishing power bait. Put those on there, really small, about the size of a pea. All right, nothing bigger than that. All right, you want it tiny, because this is a really tiny hook. You do not want to give them the bait without getting hooked. So about the size of a pea. So this power bait will last forever. All right. So you're going to roll it up in your fingers really tight, make it as tight as you can, and then put that little piece of power bait on your hook. If you use like a mealworm, works really well. Slide it through the hook long ways. So don't do it sideways. Just put it on long ways, and sort of put it through the entire body. Same thing with your piece of night crawler. You use a lot of night crawlers because you really got to tear it up, and it doesn't hold its integrity, unlike a mealworm or power bait. Those two things work very, 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 very well. Now you're going to use the smallest jig you can find. Now there's a company called Mule, like a horse, but a mule fishing. Now Mule Fishing probably makes the best, smallest plastic and jigs for ice fishing or for finesse fishing. My tackle box always has Mule Fishing stuff in it. Now, he doesn't sponsor the channel or anything like that, but Ethan, he's the owner and creator of it. Check him out. I mean, he's affordable, but it is awesome. And if for ice fishing, get his 1/80th of an ounce, or even 1/64th of an ounce. Go tiny and light, and use his. He's got good soft plastics that are tiny too, and I just use those. Now, why so light? Because as it drops, it's going to float down, not sink down. All right. So the lighter the jig, it'll start to float down and sort of work its way left and right and sort of create a pathway like a feather falling in the air. That's what your bait is going to do. Now, in the next segment, we're going to talk about fish finders. Okay? So we'll talk about electronics in the next segment. But as this thing starts to fall, fish will notice the action of this bait or this jig as it falls. And that action will get their attention. Most fish in cold water are hugging the bottom. They're typically not suspended. Now, some are. And we'll talk about crappie because you can catch crappie in cold water. Even though it's more of a warm water fish, crappie can be caught. But this bait is going to continue to sink at its own rate of speed. Again, another reason to have light line. You want the bait to live in the water all by itself. So having a 2-pound test line is very important. I use fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is completely invisible in the water. It has the same refraction point within that plastic as water does. So as soon as it hits the water, it disappears. So use a fluorocarbon that's 2 pounds, make 4 pounds heaviest. Don't go bigger than 4 pounds. And watch, and as this thing starts to sink, you're going to get the attention of the fish on the bottom. They're going to come up and hit it. Before it even gets down to the bottom, they're going to hit it. And then you're going to look at your tip, and once you see that little nibble, set the hook and pull them up. This is how you raise fish. It's crazy. You drop it, catch it, pull it up. Drop it, catch it, pull it up. It is so nuts. You will catch more fish ice fishing than you ever have probably in your life. I mean, I just take the fish and I throw them outside my tent, my shelter. Keep tossing them outside. You will see around my shelter 100 perch or whatever. And then of course sometimes that gets the attention of the eagles or the raptors like the osprey, and maybe a bear or two. Believe me, they just come up and they just take what they want. The otters will come up and it's a menagerie of food. So in our next segment, we're going to talk about electronics, and electronics are so cool. So again, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me this long, and we're going to talk about electronics as well as a summation of today. So see you back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. I know it's been so exciting. I've been looking at the Lake of the Woods cam and seeing that ice and talking to people, and I just, ugh, I'm all tingly, goosebumpy. Although it's cold in my studio right now, so I got my coffee. I got my coffee. Love my coffee. All right. We have talked quite a bit, haven't we? About all the fun things about. First segment, I kind of scared you about ice fishing. I don't want you guys to be afraid of ice fishing, because ice fishing is just too much fun. It's just too much fun. Just like any fishing, you're going to be safe. I mean, there are certain states that require life vests on people who fish on rivers or on the banks of rivers. They require it, and that shouldn't keep you away from the river. It's just a safety precaution, and so I want you guys to be safe. And the safer you are, the more enjoyable you're going to, and more joy you're going to have about doing this. So, electronics. Now, there are lots of different fish finders, okay, out there. I love fish finders for ice fishing. It is the most fun thing to have when you're ice fishing, because you get to see what's going on underneath. You get to see your bait. You get to see the fish. You get to see the environment, if indeed you have it on with a camera. I don't. Although you can take a GoPro and just sort of lower it. That's kind of fun to do, but you can't see it. Well, you kind of can. I don't know. I haven't tried it. But one thing about a fish finder, there are certain settings on a fish finder. There's a type of fish finder called a flasher for ice fishing. A flasher has a circle on it. It shows you the bottom, and red spots will show you where your bait is and the fish are. And it flashes. It just emits a diode. Then there's regular fish finders, and to see straight down below you, you have a setting on your fish finder called A, like in Apple, A scope. Your A scope is a direct downward facing sonar. And A scope, now there are some, like the Garmin has the flasher setting screen. So I always found my A scope worked better than my flasher on my Garmin 4. Okay, so you're wondering, how much does a fish finder cost, Mike? Well, fish finders run about $100 for like a Garmin or Lowrance Panamax 4, 4-inch screen. It'll run you about $100, 120. But you need a battery. They gotta have, so typically a battery, a 12-volt battery, a little portable one, will run you about, $25. So it doesn't have to cost a lot. You need a charger for it. So probably like $150 for an ice fishing setup. Now, the flashers made by Markham and other companies, they're going to run $300 to $700. Now, a flasher is, I was using my regular fish finders, my Garmin's, and they worked okay. But they had a hard time seeing me lowering a 1/80th of an ounce jig. A flasher is an A-scope that has incredible sensitivity. I mean, incredible sensitivity. It'll see particulates in the water. So there's adjustment knobs on A-scope, so you can adjust out the particulates. So if there's like little leaves or little bugs or whatever floating in the the water, you can adjust your sensitivity on your flasher, so you can only see fish and your bait. That is how sensitive a flasher is. That is cool. So I punched 2 holes in my tent, okay, one right next to the other. One for my transducer, which a transducer is the sonar, okay? It's the device that you put in the water, and I lower it just below the ice, and it's able to see what's below me. And then my hole for my fishing hole is right next to it. So I'm dropping my line right next to the transducer hole. And after a few feet, you'll see your bait on your flasher, and it's going to continue to descend, and it's going to descend, and then all of a sudden, at the bottom, you're going to see some motion. The fish, and the fish are going to come up, to check out what's coming down, and this is the fun part. It's because you're seeing life, and you're seeing a video game sort of playing out right in front of you, except it's real. This is really, really, really cool. Okay. So the fish is going to come up, your bait is going to come down, and hopefully they'll take it. And when that happens, your bait turns bright red on the flasher. That's when you get not one fish, 2 fish, 3 fish. There's a bunch of them hovering around that bait. So once a fish comes to it, stop your bait. Just let the fish look at it, and then continue it a little bit more, and let the fish follow it. And then if they still don't bite it, lift the tip of your rod up just a little bit. Bring that rod up about 6 to 10 inches, and let them chase it. If they chase it, their bite instinct will kick in, and they'll take it. You can see a bite on a fish finder right before it happens. It's the coolest. It is the coolest thing that you will ever do. It is. I mean, when we're regular fishing in the summer, we don't get to see this because we're casting too far away from us to see. Now, there are nowadays, there's called forward-facing sonar. And now they can see it with these thousands and thousands of dollars of sonar that they put on their boats. It's controversial because the bass fishing community thinks it's cheating. But it's just another tool to catch fish. It's just another tool. But, forward-facing sonar is kind of what you're doing, but you're down-facing sonar with ice fishing. And that is highly entertaining. Highly entertaining. You will be enraptured, by looking at this circle. Okay? You're just going to look at the circle, and it's just you're going to see little red dots, and your little red dot, and their little red dot, and then they merge, and then there'll be big red dots, and then you're going to feel it, and you're going to pull them up. There ain't nothing more fun than that. It's just, a flasher is the coolest fish finder there is when it comes to ice fishing. And you're going to see them online. This time of year, you got Black Friday, and you might want, check them out. There's a bunch of them. I have a Markham, but there's others. There's 2 or 3 manufacturers that make flashers. And or just get a Garmin 4 with a battery and a charger for it. That works. It's a fraction of the price, but online you can probably find some pretty good deals. Let's see. I'm going to go online and sort of see what it's not, I'm sure that they'll have, so Walmart's got a Markham for $2.99. Cabela's got Garmin Striker 4 ice fishing setup. That's with a battery charger and a bag and everything for $179. Like I said, the Garmin 4 actually has a flasher display that you can choose, but it has a very good A scope. I have one of these, and that's what I used until I went to my Garmin 7, and then that was just too much to carry out there. So it's nice to have these little portable bags of these. But if you go and you check these websites out on flashers, you will be. They're just so sensitive. They just are so sensitive. They're fantastic. You're gonna love it. You really will. I can't get over it. I have an M5, I think, and it's just a sensitivity, and depth, and so and that tweaking the knob in order to get rid of the particulates, because it is so sensitive. So I don't order anything from AliExpress, but I'm sure AliExpress has got them too for cheaper because it's straight from China. But that is kind of the fun of ice fishing, guys. You live in an area that, I didn't know this when I moved here. One, we have lily pads, all right, in the summer. Don't have those in California. We don't have lily pads. And we have ice. Gerber is a great lake, and so is Lake of the Woods. So those are the ones within an hour of us. Lake of the Woods is only half hour away. Technically, it's in town. And they have a staff there that you can rent stuff, so you don't have to. They have a whole, kit, with the auger, the sled, and the tent that you can rent all day. I think it's like $45, and it'll fit 4 people. Just go in there and just bring your chairs and a little fishing gear. Buy some worms. Definitely get the Tequila Sunrise power bait. I think that really is your best bet for ice fishing. But and they usually stock up on Tequila Sunrise at Lake of the Woods. That is your best ice fishing tackle spot, is Lake of the Woods Marina. And because that's their industry in the winter. In February, I host a big ice fishing event there, and that's going to be a lot of fun. As we get closer to February, you'll hear me talk more and more about that. And then I'll need volunteers to help me punch holes in the ice. Because we got to punch over 100 holes in the ice because we had 1,000 people, 2 years ago there. So I want to thank you guys for stopping in and giving us your time. This is a free fishing weekend. So the next 2 days, you don't need a permit. You don't need a permit. Just go out there and go fishing. Picnic with some leftover turkey, okay, and some of the food that you got leftovers from yesterday, and just have fun with the kids and with the family. It's not a time for arguing. It's time for peace. Give them a gift, a memory, something they'll treasure for the rest of their lives. This is a great weekend. So take advantage of it. You never know. My kids never met my parents. They died before they were born, except for my oldest, but she was only 6 months old when my mother died. So take advantage of this time with family and treasure it, because I'll tell you, I should have died 10 years ago, and many times over since. You never know. Take care. Tight lines to all of you, and give your family and friends a big hug. Take care, everybody.